we're just going to go ahead and just kind of jump right in, because I think this is going to go a lot faster than it should, or than I'd like for it to. Thank you guys so much for coming. You guys are all people I really enjoy hanging out with. I really value and appreciate your opinions. I know it might be crazy being three vocal coaches into the same Zoom room and letting them talk about something, because I was like, what could happen?
We may break it into harmony.
Yeah.
We could hope.
So, yeah, going into this process, everybody switching online. Once everybody got online, the first thing, including myself, I was teaching 7-8 lessons in a row, back to back, plus being on Zoom all day for working with Fons. And at the end of the day, my throat was thrashed, like just, and plus, I'm trying to be like, hey, this is Eric, trying to sound my deep, whatever I was doing was not working. And then I'm seeing this comment more than anything else in all the groups. It's like, what, my throat hurts. I just have a list of just comments where people are like, my throat hurts. What do I do with this? So I called on you guys to come together and talk about, why this is happening. Because all of you have told me, you're like, I'm teaching all day and I'm fine. My voice feels great. So I'm like, okay, let's chat about this. And I wanted to get multiple ideas, because I know you come from different backgrounds, and I'll introduce you in just a second, about, how you approach it. And hopefully, so the people that are listening that we can share this with later, this video, be like, oh, this works for me. Right. So I'm hoping today to start out, say, hey, what's going on? Why is everybody experiencing this vocal discomfort from working online all day? What do you do about it? What do you recommend? Are there some exercises we can try, warm-ups? And then we just open up some questions if anybody has them, because I think it's a deal. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be online for a while, right? And it's also, I think it might be, I think Karin originally pointed out that it's just pointing out some issues that we have in our delivery, in our technique of how we're doing it. So I'm really thankful that you're here. It's great to see you. For everybody that's joining us, that's watching this later, we've got Karin Wilcox here from San Diego, good friend, amazing opera singer, vocal coach. We've got Tom Sitzler. Wait, what town do you live in, Tom? Is it
Philadelphia?
Oh, you're in Philly. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were outside of Philly or not. But
I am technically outside of Philly in Bryn Mawr.
Bryn Mawr, that's what I thought it was. Okay. And he's a baritone, great vocal coach as well. And then Allie Tyler, these are all great friends of mine, who's from Colorado, and she also runs the Whole Voice Project, which is really cool. And you had a great blog post today, Allie, that really about your experience. It was very moving for this time. I hope we can share those with everybody that joins us today. So I wanted to, just open things up and say, what's going on with our voices? Like, why is it that at the end of a day, I can barely talk? I walk out of my studio at 8 o'clock and I'm raspy, my throat hurts. I feel like it's getting better over time, maybe a little bit, but I would love to hear maybe just initially what you guys think about what's going on. And given the time constraints we have, I'll kind of moderate and move things back and forth, but I'd love to hear from all you about what you think. Someone like to just jump in and, Karin, you want to just take a moment and introduce yourself? And
So, hi, I'm Karin, and I have been living out in San Diego. Right now, I'm actually back in Colorado Springs with my husband, because, craziness started, and I didn't want to get stuck separated. What I really focus on for voice and just is first of all, gaining an understanding of what is physiologically happening here. When we talk, we have two little pieces of tissues that essentially vibrate against each other. And they do this with either more efficiency or less efficiency, depending on how we're feeling, whether we're physically tired, and I'll get more to that later. But essentially, at the end of the day, when things are feeling really rough, what has been happening is you've been vibrating those pieces of tissue inefficiently / possibly pressing them together in a way that irritates them, and that starts making them puffy, because in a perfect world, there's a mucosal layer there and everything. If they're really vibrating just really naturally and released, it's not unlike how your lips would vibrate when playing a trumpet. You can do it in a way that's more comfortable or less comfortable. Now, I don't have any personal experience much with trumpet, But I mean, I've blown into it. I know the theory, but that's about it. But that's essentially what your vocal cords are doing. And if you don't know how to coordinate them, if you don't know how to, or if you've gotten into a tense habit where things are getting tired, your body's getting tired, your airflow isn't going as relaxed as it usually does, we start compensating by pressing them together, especially, and that's the whole low, speaking in your low voice. That's what ends up happening. We end up pressing them, and they just get more and more and more and more irritated. They get irritated, they get puffy, they get less efficient, which makes us do it even more. So that's essentially what's happening. Would you guys agree with that assessment?
Oh, yeah.
Follow up on that a little bit. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, what's usually happening is the reason why that's happening is because you're speaking in a way that you normally don't speak. So you may be speaking too low in your voice, which is not natural for you, or too high in your voice, which is also not natural for your own speaking. You also may be speaking at a volume that is too big because you think they can't hear you, or too quiet too as well. Like if you're not supporting the sound, even like because you think you may. I used to have this when I was teaching piano, just to little kids, like right next to them, and I would like lessen my voice because I didn't want to hurt them. I don't know what I was thinking in my head. It was going to hurt their eardrums or something just from speaking normal. So I find that if I speak normally, it usually works itself out.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I feel like when we are teaching or when we're playing a role of some sort, like I'm playing teacher role now, we tend to have different voices. I actually make fun of my husband a lot because I can tell when he's in his real estate mode on the phone because his voice gets super low. And I think it's this interesting psychological thing where we want people to react to us in a certain way. And so we inflect our voice differently. And I know that for me personally, I mean, I've been teaching for 11 years, so I very much know my voice teaching voice, right? I know how to turn it on and off. But I do think that, yeah, it's kind of what you guys were saying too. And what you were saying, Tom, about just speaking too low, speaking too high. Something that really helps, I feel, in terms of technique too, in this like sustainable teaching realm, is just practicing recognizing your different talks. Like, how do you talk to your partner and your kids versus how do you talk to your students versus how do you talk to the cashier versus how do you talk to someone on the phone? So everyone has a different way that we talk to each other depending on who you're talking to and the circumstance. And I find that even just being aware of that, like just noticing in your voice, like, oh, I tend to talk way down here when I'm at home and just chilling out with my family versus I talk way up here when I'm talking with my students, right? So even just being aware of those different levels can help with being able to sustain your voice in the long run.
Yeah, I would very much add to that what you were talking about just in terms of mindfulness and noticing what feels good and noticing what doesn't feel good, and also being able and willing to shift. So one thing that I do with, and this is with voice students, but I think it really applies in this situation too, is once my students figure out what healthy feels like, meaning what just feels like they can do it forever. If it feels like you can do it forever and not get tired, you're probably doing something right. Once my students figure out what healthy feels like, I tell them to go home and do donuts in the parking lot with their voice, meaning make all sorts of weird, screechy, hooty, non-sing-songy, we get into this idea of what is singing or what is correct talking, and forget about what sounds correct, go with what feels good and be willing to experiment with that, and also just notice where you're holding tension as you are speaking in different circumstances. For me, if I sit for 2 hours teaching voice or just talking, I tend to start getting some tension in my chest and in my lower abs, which then makes my lower rib cage tighten up, which makes the whole breathing thing a little bit harder, at which point it's probably good for me to stand up and just take a few deep breaths. So being mindful, figuring out what feels good and going with what feels good.
So would you all say, and before I say anything else, we have people joining us today. I'm so glad you guys are here. You can feel free to comment or ask questions in the chat. Hi, everybody. We can't hear you. So if I were watching this, and I would be muted, and I would be like, I'll do some donuts right now. I mean, that's so. Feel free to caterwaul wherever you are, because I think this is so interesting. I really like that we already touched on the point of it's situational. As soon as you're mentioning how we talk to different people, it's like, yeah, we have our different voices. It never really occurred to me, and my teaching voice tries to come across with authority. Sometimes it tries to come with a connection. And I've noticed I've really been pushing because I'm dealing with kids. I'm trying to get them engaged, being like, oh my gosh, everything's upended in your life. Here's your structure. Come to me. And so I'm talking loudly, right? More loudly than I usually do. Because usually I want to pull them in, we're together and be like, hey, I'm chill. But now it's like, hey, are you paying attention? I'm talking loudly. And I think that, would you all three agree that you can teach or work on this environment for multiple hours without being in pain at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yay, we agree.
And we do it by demonstrating singing too. Like when you're demonstrating piano or guitar, you're not then using your instrument. You're using this instrument, not your vocal instrument. So we have that added extra benefit of always constantly doing warm-ups. So
Right.
And always constantly, I mean, just because of our profession, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know if there's a minute in a day that goes by without me thinking about singing or imagining something with my voice, or just, yeah, it's just a constant awareness.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, that's already so much to unpack, which is, being mindful with how we speak to people. I mean, that's going to keep me up tonight, because I had a conversation with another startup founder this morning who was in Israel, and he's really cool. And I tried to sound really cool. Like, he's just a cool guy. So I'm like, well, hey, I'm really more like Johnny Cash than Eric Branner. So yeah, that's a beautiful notion. So, your vocal cords are getting puffy. And I think this is also stuff we can share with our students. Like, even as a guitar teacher, it's really good to see how the people we're working with are communicating, even if we're not per se a vocal coach, because that technique and how we present ourselves is going to be a thing in everybody's life, right? I mean, if I were in sales right now, if I were, in any job I do, I would be studying with a vocal coach, because if you're on the phone all day, this is the time that you got to get this thing dialed in, because it's also how we communicate. Right? This is what we have right now. So what do you guys think as far as what are the best ways to avoid it? It sounds like it's technical. It also sounds like it's mental, right? It's mindfulness, it's mental. Is there a big element to it? Like, am I dehydrated? Like, is posture or like, are things like that really big elements? Or what would you go to first, I would say, for someone who's like trying
first, I would say, like, definitely make sure you're hydrated. Yeah, constantly drinking water while teaching. I find that if I go for more than 20-30 minutes without drinking, then I start feeling effects.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And if you feel affected by coffee and by the dehydration of coffee and other teas and those kind of things, then limit the amount that you have. But I happen to be one that doesn't get affected that much by those things.
Okay,
Same here.
Yeah, I don't think I could do this without coffee.
No, so
Me neither.
when people put a blanket on saying, well, get rid of coffee and get rid of milk and get rid of all these things that cause the vocal issues, that's not blanket. I find that is per person. You got to find what your comfort is with those products.
Yeah, and also I think, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But yeah, there have also been studies that say if you're used to coffee, it actually does. It not only does it not have the big old dehydration effect, but it actually does hydrate you. Like, if you're used to your morning cup of coffee, don't feel the need to give that up. I mean, hear me over here with my big 16-ounce mug.
What sounds like on the continuum that technique and mindfulness are probably the most important as far as.
There's another thing. Oh, go ahead, Karin.
No, you go ahead. I've talked a lot.
Oh, I was just going to say something else too, not liquid related or of that caliber, but something in terms of talking that I have found super helpful. I don't know if I made this up or if I heard this somewhere. I don't know. I've been doing it for so long, I can't remember, but I call it the shelf technique. So you imagine that there's a shelf right here in between your nose and your mouth. And if I'm talking in my low shelf, I'm hanging out with my family, I'm hanging out with my dogs, I don't really care what I sound like. Or I'm talking on my high shelf, I'm talking above the shelf. And so when you talk above the shelf, like kind of up in this area in your mask, it helps with being able to take the pressure off of here. Like singers know that we don't sing from here. We don't sing from our throat. If you find a voice teacher that tells you this, then they're not a good voice teacher because it's just not true. We don't want to have that tension all stuck in here. So some teachers will say things like sing from your mask. I'm sure that you guys have heard this before, or speak from your mask. And basically, I have found that to be really helpful. I mean, you can hear me even doing it right now, just slightly lifting the pitch a little bit, thinking about the sound coming a little bit more up this way. Again, that top shelf area. And that helps keep this from happening where you're putting all this pressure on your cords. So I'll even tell my students, when you're ordering something, practice it, because they'll be like, I feel so strange talking this high. It feels really uncomfortable. I'm so used to it because I'm a teacher and I do this, but I know it feels really awkward to talk that way. So practice doing it in little places where you can. I mean, around the house, obviously we're all at home now. So, you can practice talking with your kids or your significant other if you have people in your home, or if you're by yourself, hey, talk to yourself. It's an awesome time. But in general, just kind of lifting that up, thinking about speaking from the high shelf. That has been tremendously helpful for me in my teaching, and then just as a general vocal tip in terms of talking.
Can I follow up on that really quick, and then we'll come over to you, Karin? Because we also had a quick question, and I think it's important to answer from Elena, which is, what is the mask, right? And because that's something I've really spent a lot of time learning about too. And if you could explain that really quickly, when you mean like, that feeling of coming out of your eyes, kind of, or that's what it feels like to me when I experiment with that. But maybe you could just quickly, somebody could jump in on what is the
Tom, you answered it. The resonance chambers in the sinus area. Totally. Yeah.
We have several resonance chambers that, especially as opera singers, we use these resonance chambers to create the sound so that we can be much, much louder, fill an entire hall without having amplification. So we don't use microphones, we just use our own bodies to create that amplification. And in order to maximize on that, we have areas in the throat that we open up, our pharynx and our mouth, as well as up in here. Now up here we can't actually physically open this up. It's all bone. So we can't manipulate this, but we can direct the sound into that area and take off, like she said, take off pressure from the squeezing in the throat.
Cool.
I'd add to that, and this is what I was raising my hand about earlier, is just to remind, this is what, when we talk about directing sound in the mask, we're feeling it here from a purely acoustic standpoint, just physics. That's where we're feeling the resonances. So our voice box is actually down here. So in a sense, we are singing from our throat, but the way we do this efficiently is by relaxing all these muscles down here, making a big, huge open space so that those vocal cords can vibrate freely. And then when they vibrate freely, they create all of that resonance that then goes bing into our head. So when we talk about singing in the mask or feeling it up here, it's really, really important to remember, I think, that these are subjective secondary resonances and perceptions that each individual singer has, and that are going to feel a little bit different for each singer. So as you're experimenting with this, think in terms of what creates those resonances and what actions down here, as you're aware of things going bing, as that goes bing, you're like, okay, that went bing. What did I do down here that made that go bing? Do you guys agree?
Totally. Yes. Yeah, that's a very fuzzy area too, because a lot of people will think like, oh, I'm making sound. It gets very confusing. So I'm really glad that you specified that it's, it's a little hairy of a line. A really easy way, if you are still struggling and you have no idea what we're talking about, is just to do an NG, like sing, or an M. And I always tell my students who are brand new to making sound and singing to just put their fingers right here. You can do this. If you're on mute right now, you can just go, or right? So you can kind of feel, you can like feel these sensations. Sensations are confusing as singers because it's like we feel the sensation, but it's not really happening there, but it's kind of happening there. There's a lot of science to it, of course. So just be aware of the fact that you may feel something, but it's not necessarily what's actually happening. But again, yeah, that mindfulness component to it, being aware and feeling that kind of that buzzy, that ringy sensation, and starting with voiced consonants, N's, M's, NG's. Those are really good ways to at least start exploring that area, the mask area.
Yeah, and watching on those closed consonants is watching what's happening down there, because I find with a lot of my students, the first thing that happens when they do is like the larynx pops up into their nose.
Interesting.
So you know, it's both of those things. So if that's not working for you, if that's feeling tight, another place to feel is, what is my larynx doing? If it's down and nice and relaxed, like during a yawn, awesome. If not, drop it down and see what happens. So yeah, I'd agree with you.
You know, and unpacking that a little bit, 'cause that's a lot of stuff. This is really helpful, right? You know, I'm a lesson nerd. Yeah, I've had like 50 or 55 private teachers, and you know, because I love taking lessons, right? And I've studied with a lot of vocal coaches as a guitar player, right? And gone through this stuff, you know, and I think such an important instrument to understand, you know, that I've learned more about my musicality and the way I want things to vibrate and how I voice my guitar from great vocal coaches I've worked with, right, than I have from a lot of guitar teachers I've worked with, right? And I think it's really, I think the people that are here watching this are like, oh, this is pretty rad. It makes if you haven't studied with a vocal coach, there's a bunch right here. You should check it out, because it's really, you get so much so quickly to start being like, oh, that's tradition. It's like, oh, it's chest or head, you know, and like that's it, or falsetto. And I wanted to follow up, and I don't want to make this about me, but I think it's important. Societally, like I listen to you guys speak and I hear this range, and it's like mellifluous and it's beautiful, and it's like, it's so communicative, right? And I one of the reasons I love talking with you, and societally, we really get into this like spot, right? Whatever position we're trying to be, whether it's like a power thing or I'm really trying to be cool. And I think it's really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I'd say especially men have a hard time speaking above that shelf, right? And being, you know, comfortable with it. How would you know, how do you encourage people? Like, what does that shelf sound like for Tom, who's like a baritone? Because to me, that all sounds like deep and hearty, but you're still, you know, is that a decent question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be, it's more of, for men, we have more chest voice activation. Our chords get thicker than for women. They have more head voice activation. And so it's a little bit different just in pitch range. So as men, we're mostly going to be speaking and singing in our chest voice, regardless of things.
Oh.
That's just kind of how the nature of things. Doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have the head voice. And it doesn't mean that if you're trying to force your voice down to be in that deeper range. So what I always like to do with just speaking with students is to have them yell a sort of easy hey. And I think you did this once in a video where you were recording and you're like, this is, I've been told from a vocal coach. So if you were just sitting there and trying to get your wife's attention in the other room, and you're like, hey, without trying to force it out or push and do any kind of thing, just naturally do it without gripping from the throat, you'll feel where the support comes, and you'll feel where your natural voice will lie. The other thing, yeah. And I find that as a good warm-up, too, that if you're going to get in to just do vocal sirens of like sliding up and down from your pitch range, from your lowest note to your highest, feeling where you start to feel that tension and see if you can relax it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, even when you speak though, Tom, like your voice is so resonant, you know, and it's just, I'm just listening now so attentively to it, and it's got this like ring. It feels like the sound is like right here, you know, and there's, especially with men, I feel like sometimes the sound's like way down here. And I think you're right, Eric. I wonder if that's like I'm not a man, so I don't know, but a societal influence for sure, you know, in terms of psychologically how you come across to other people, right? I just wanted to point that out, that Tom, you do have have a very resonant voice. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, that's another thing where our own perception of ourselves plays in a lot. And I think for guys, like both girls and guys go through a vocal change. For guys, it's a whole lot more dramatic and audible than others. And I think it just occurs to me, I think a lot of guys, especially during that time, they learn to kind of put their voices a little low to try to avoid that cracky spot. Embrace the crack. If your voice is crackling, if you do this with your voice, as long as it's relaxed, it's completely healthy. And it's a whole lot healthier to just kind of crackle or speak in a really relaxed vocal fry if you're tired at the end of the day. As long as it's a relaxed one. There are unhealthy vocal fries, so that's something to be approached with caution. But as long as it feels relaxed, it's better to talk that way for longer periods of time and just take it easy on yourself, which is what a lot of my vocal coaches actually do. One of my vocal coaches, he's a baritone, and when he's in a lesson situation, he'll just talk like this, and you don't have to talk at full voice the entire time. So embrace the crack is what I'd say. Don't try to make your voice super consistent if you're tired. Just let it be relaxed and be aware of that. But you also have to embrace the mental freedom to allow yourself to do that, especially online when we're trying to put out even more energy to draw on our students when we're used to having someone right next to us. So.
Oh, here's a good question. Crack as in passaggio or as in vocal fry?
Passaggio. Yeah. So where there's a moment where the vocal cords are stretching in order to reach higher pitches, will create higher frequencies. And at some point, the cords are going to go from being thick, which is more of your chest voice action, to being thin, which is your head voice action. And when you have that crack, it's actually our body's way of protecting the voice. So it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. We, as singers, want to smooth out that crack. So we have this ability to allow the cords to go from thick to thin without it going like that.
I see.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like if you remember like a boy going through puberty, and the boy, oh, this is cracking like that. It's that kind of action.
That just brings back wonderful memories.
Doesn't it?
Okay, well, this is amazing. But so I want to, before we move into the next, maybe this is a good second, or for people that are listening, if you have questions or if you would like to throw something in the chat, feel free. Gosh, I definitely want to go back through this and mute my mic and play a lot of stuff. But in a second, I think it'd be really great to kind of share some of these, to go through these exercises you guys think are awesome. But is there anything, I wanted to follow up on one idea I heard. If you're monitoring yourself, and I noticed that none of you guys are, maybe Karin, you might be monitoring yourself because you got headphones on.
I have a headphone in.
You do. So are you, I didn't want to talk much about gear, but I think since we're doing the online thing, it's a good idea to be like, okay, do you encourage monitoring your own voice, right? Through your microphone, through your headphones. Is that important, or is it fine to just, have things good? Do you have thoughts on that, or any kind of gear related things that you think are pertinent in this space we're working in?
For me,
go for it, Karin. Yeah, no, you go.
Yeah, for me, I do this just to avoid feedback. You notice I only have it in one ear.
Okay.
Because if I put it in both ears, then I mute myself to myself, and I can do that. I'm practiced enough. It depends on what you're vocally comfortable with, but it just gets annoying and it gets weird to try to listen to yourself that way. So I like to have my own voice feeding back at least into one ear so that I don't overwork myself, because if you can't hear yourself, the temptation is even more there to push to make up that loudness that you're not hearing because your ears are plugged. But at the same time, I like to avoid monitor the feedback that comes if someone else is making a loud noise, or if I make a loud noise and the other person hears it and then it loops back, it just becomes messy.
Killer. Yeah, the reason I ask is I tried, over ear covered earphones to try to monitor myself, but I noticed, and I see it in my students too, you try to sound, you're hearing yourself and you're trying to sound like cool or whatever. You're hearing the sound of yourself in your headphones, and then to me, I was more fatigued because I was trying to sound like what I thought I should sound like. And I'd
You gotta
like
ignore it. You gotta ignore the sound. You have to go by sensation.
Yep.
You know, whether the sensation feels better to come from your chest, or whether you feel like this, like Allie was saying, where the sensation is better coming from up in the mask. Anything that feels better is going to be the sensation you want to go towards. So sensation is key.
And just putting everything you guys said together, it sounds like you got resonance here, and some combination of it. You're totally relaxed here, right?
Yes.
Like that's how important is your jaw in this situation? My wife's an actor, and she's always relaxing her jaw. Like that's like, and I think a lot of that's for just.
You can.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
But is that,
I don't find it to be super impactful for speaking, but I don't really pay attention to my jaw when I'm speaking, to be honest. But yeah, that I'm sure it would help to have a relaxed jaw for sure. And also with the monitoring, I guess my question is, when you say that, do you mean that, like, as I'm talking right now, I only hear my natural voice? I don't hear anything coming in my computer. Is that what you're referring to when you're talking about monitoring?
Hearing your voice monitored through the computer. I think Sitzler, who's here, who is one of the greatest teachers in the universe, I think he monitors. I think I read somewhere that he will hear his voice through his headphones as a way to use a smaller voice as he's teaching.
That would drive me nuts.
Yeah, I haven't tried that.
So he says monitoring myself helps me from trying to talk too loudly.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, I haven't tried that. I'm like basically on the phone, you know, like I just hear you guys in here. It's mostly because my husband's working from home too, you know, so, but that's, I don't know. That's interesting. I'll have to try that and play around with the monitoring thing. I haven't tried it.
What I would definitely recommend though is if you don't have a microphone, I definitely recommend getting one, because it'll capture what's in the room better than what you're going to have with your like laptop or your phone, and it'll help you if it gets to what's in the room better. You can monitor the volume of it itself. That your student will hear you better on their end, and you won't have to try to scream as loud just to get them to stop playing. I also recommend hand signals.
I do this a lot.
Because the way these video chats are created is that whatever side is loudest will be heard over the other. So if you're trying to that's why we're trying to yell to get the person to stop, because they're like playing really loud on the piano, and you're like, so I just let them keep playing until they come a moment where they stop or mess up, and then we go back and work on it. So or if they look at me, I have a hand signal up and I'll be like waving.
Got it.
Yeah.
And Steve heard about teaching ring a bell.
Oh yeah.
I'm imagining one of these teaching platforms putting in a stop button that just goes on the other person. So all you do is click a button on your side and the student screen like flash.
It'd probably better if you had like a flash. Because then they're visually like, oh, what? It would get their attention. That would be interesting.
Love it.
Anybody that's listening, man, like the thing is, I talk to over 100 providers a week. You know, you guys know me. I'm a talker. I'm always talking to everybody that's coming in, be like getting their business online, connecting with people, and they're like, okay, I've got like an 11-year-old Lenovo laptop. And I'm using an iPhone 1 with and it's like, no, this is our living. Like, if you do your business in this environment, for God's sakes, get yourself a microphone. You don't have to go crazy on it, but like, I mean, for me, I'm like, dude, Zoom's holding our whole world together. Spring for the paid version. I mean, this is allowing us to make a living. We've all had to change very quickly, this is going to be our new realm. I don't know if I'm going to go back. My students are crushing it right now, right? They're loving this format. They have a lot of time to practice. I don't know, I'm sure I want to go back to one-on-one in real life lessons, but I want to dial this in. And for me, and for many people, the majority of people, once they figure out their business flow and they got everything online, the people that have been in this space that are doing it, not because of necessity, because their gigs got cut, but like, this is something that they do. They're thriving right now, right? So I'm like, man, it's a great time to be like, yeah, dial in your voice, because that's how we're communicating. Figure out your systems to figure out to get people to stop. Get a microphone. Angie had a question about recommending for a good microphone for online lessons. I think
I love
Steve and
mine.
I have the same. Yeah. What are you using? Is that a
This is the Blue Yeti.
Yeah, the Blue Yeti.
Yeah. Yep. Super easy.
And it sounds. Is that USB?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mine is a what is it? CAD U37.
Okay.
CAD U37. I saw a website called voicelessons.com. I don't know if you guys have seen this. And so they're basically like an online platform like Zoom, but specifically for giving voice lessons. And they've developed this thing where you connect your computer over as a MIDI into your keyboard into the piano as a MIDI, and then you can play an exercise, and it plays it on their end, and they're singing along to the thing, and it automatically goes up and down. And then they had a whole white paper that I read. I mean, it was like 50 pages of the different kind of microphones that they tested out, of which they thought were the best, and also what was the best for cost effectiveness too. So this was only like $60.
Oh wow, it's been good for you. Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe post those what you have in there. I have I have a locker full of microphones, and I'm just using like an old Audio Technica. I think Steve uses the same thing, but I don't know if anybody for something. I have like an Apogee Duet, which is an audio interface, which is a really awesome kind of simple digital to audio converter that I think works really well too. And I'm trying to dial it in. Oh, Steve's using the Blue Yeti too?
Sweet. Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Cool.
Yeah, it sounds great.
I like it because it's easy. So if you are not a technological person like me, you just literally plug it in. That's all you do.
Yeah. Easy,
so nice.
And it works, right?
Yeah.
Which is, that's really important. I want to do, well, actually, does anybody else have any other questions? We talked about gear. Because what I would love to do is I'd love to use a little bit of time to just go around a bit and reiterate what would you do to warm up at the beginning of a day? How do you get your game on? What things do you recommend for getting your talking voice going? I'm really stoked. I mean, I love hey, I never warm my voice up before I start. I mean, I've been on meetings since like 8 o'clock this morning already. My voice is starting to go out. I'm teaching 7 lessons tonight. So yeah, I want to make that time. Let's say I have 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to commit to warming up my pipes before I start teaching for the day, try to get mindful. You guys want to just kind of share your a couple go-tos maybe for speaking?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that when I teach, I like to talk about the 3 steps. We make space to sing, we breathe in, and then we make noise. And so figuring out those 3 steps, especially the breathing part, because a lot of times when we speak and we start getting into a certain voice, we also speak or breathe too shallow, and it goes up, and you're like, and it's just creating tension. So remembering to breathe down, also your speed that you're talking in, that also will slow things down, not cause you to get sort of in that kind of anxious pattern. But I always like to figure out the airflow of things. So I might be doing some breathing in and out. There's a famous singer, not countertenor, he was a castrati, Farinelli, who created this breathing technique where you breathe in for 5, right? I know. You breathe in for 5 counts, sustain, meaning don't breathe in or out. You're in this kind of limbo spot for 5 counts. Then out for 5 counts, sustain for 5, and then increase 7, 5, 7, 5, 9, 5, and you keep going until like 13 or so. And you just put on a metronome, and that calms the brain. It gets your breath going. You feel every nook and cranny that your lungs can have capacity.
Hey, let me stop you on that idea really quick. You breathe in for 5, you hold for 5, you breathe out for 5.
Yeah.
And then do you hold for 5 with nothing in your lungs?
Yes.
Or do you start breathing again?
Yes. You breathe
it's
out.
Called
you
box
sustain
breathing.
it. Yeah. And I like to use the word sustain, not hold, because we don't want to close the cords to hold the breath in. We want to just leave everything open, like you're in this moment of suspension.
Yeah, so you're not going and then feeling that against your
squeeze.
And having to hold the breath in just by the fact that your diaphragm is still down and holding that space for the air in your lungs. The way I like to say this to my students is breathe where you're going to sing. So, and that comes to feeling how your throat feels when you breathe in and how relaxed it feels. Because a lot of people go, and that just creates tension. So you want to keep your shoulders down and relaxed, and feel your throat as you want, as big and free as you want it to feel while you're speaking. And what I like to do personally, go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, I was just laughing at Eric as he was doing the breathing.
I'm all in.
I like to do, and this really depends on your voice type. I've been told Tom, you probably, I don't know what your, what style singing you do, Allie, primarily, but for opera, at least for me, if I'm actually warming up to do some big opera singing, it's always best for me to do some screechy stuff for about 15 minutes, just kind of get the blood flowing, and then leave it be for about 30 minutes. So if you have the chance to in the morning, like as you're getting your cup of coffee, just kind of go, ah, and just, and I talked about vocal fry earlier. I'm going to change that terminology to crackle, because vocal fry is generally associated with like bad vocal habits and tension.
The Kardashians.
Crackle is something that's actually pretty well documented in the vocal science community, starting in the 60s. When I just recently ordered a book. I'm a nerd. But crackle is in that passaggio, that little spot right between where the chest and the head voice begins, or the chest and the falsetto voice. That it's where we normally want to go, like when we yawn. So start with a couple of those in the morning. Go, hey, what Tom was doing. Make a little bit of vocal noise for about 10 minutes. Doesn't matter what kind of noise it is, as long as it feels good. Just kind of plug your ears. Don't listen to yourself, and just whatever feels good. Leave it be for 30 minutes, and you're probably going to be more comfortable automatically for the rest of the day.
Set it out a little bit, huh? Let it rest after you warm it up. Never heard that.
Yeah, well, it's like muscles. You warm up, you stretch, and then you go do your workout.
And I think it's worth following. That hey exercise is really helpful. When and I learned it as like you're calling your neighbors over the fence, and it is an awesome way to kind of find out how things are balanced and how they're working. I love the breathing thing. I never think about that. I'm a constant state of rushing. Allie, what about you? What do you think?
Ooh, okay, so the straw. I love the straw. Okay, let's talk about the straw. Do you know what I'm talking about, Eric? Or are you completely what are you doing?
The straw, yes.
Yeah.
Stay honest.
Okay, cool. I love straw singing. Mine's a little thick you can get whatever straw, really. It doesn't matter. But I have this whole thing. These are all my student straws when they were actually coming over to my house. So great thing to do first thing in the morning. I love that tip, Karin, of waiting a little bit. I've never done that. I'm totally going to try that out, of like warming up a little bit, wait a little bit. So how the straw works, if you are unfamiliar with this, is you sing through it. And there is a right and wrong way to do this. This is something that people don't talk about. They're like, oh, you just through the straw. But actually, you can do it in a way that isn't helpful. So I'll show you the wrong way. Let's say if I'm going, and then I put that straw in water, which is a great way to warm up. And there are no bubbles coming out. That's not good. We actually want to be singing on the exhale, so we want, and you'll feel like if you guys have straws and water and you try it out, you're going to feel a difference between those two ways of doing it. But so yeah, grabbing a cup of water, grabbing your straw, and something I always do is start descending. So if we think about our actual vocal cords and how they sort of work, it's harder on the vocal cords to stretch them out right from the get-go, especially if it's like first thing in the morning. It's nice to start from your higher register and go lower. So maybe the descent could be just a siren. So you could go, right? So you can just do little sirens. You could do fifths. So for you musicians out there, right? Little fifths, descendings. You can do major scale descendings, but descending to start is such a great way. Sirens, anything that does something with your voice that helps get to notes easier versus like, ooh, ooh, but ooh, things that are a little more slippy slidey. Just really, yeah, it's really nice on your vocal cords. I always say it's like giving them a massage, you know, when you do that. It's like they love sirens. So I love straw singing. I can't recommend it enough. Even if you do 5 minutes, you're going to feel such a big difference. Eric, before you go teach your 7 students today, take a straw and just do just making noise in the straw in between students really helps too. And then one thing real quick about breathing that I wanted to just say, this is actually COVID related. I hate to bring it up, but I do feel like it's important. I have been reading a lot about breath work and saving lives with this particular disease, this flu. One of my good friends, I just was texting with her this morning. She now has COVID, and so she's quarantined, and we were just talking, and she's like, it's crazy, Allie, like all of it, just sometimes it hits you at once and you can't breathe, and it's literally all the things they say. So I've been sending her all of these breathing techniques. Breathing techniques are such a great way to help our immune system right now and our lungs and all of the things that are potentially being attacked. So if that is inspiration for you to just do breathing in general, like doing that box pattern that you were talking about, the breathe in, breathe out, you know, that 4-part pattern, that's what they've actually been recommending in hospitals to do that, the patients that can't breathe. So it's a great thing to do in general to just keep your lungs healthy. So I just wanted to say that.
I would add to that. So part of my story, and thankfully this has become, you know, has resolved itself in recent years, but for the better part of my 20s, I had stress-related breathing issues. And it was just that it's funny because a lot of the symptoms I was having, they sound very similar actually to what COVID patients describe, where all of a sudden just like fluid fills your lungs and you can't breathe anymore. And for me, I just had a lot of physical tension that was, I think, essentially shoving my lungs into too small of a space. And yet somehow I was singing opera on this. But what I found is there's actually a reflex point that right between, so if you imagine your rib cage coming down like this, like right in between that point, basically it's a spot where if you get the wind knocked out of you, it's because you got hit in that spot. And if you take your thumb and just kind of do little circles, if that hurts like the dickens, you probably got some tension there. And once you've kind of massaged that out, what my massage therapist actually did with me once, which cleared my lungs out for a month, was she took her thumb and she started that point and basically dug underneath the rib cage. And what that does is it hurts, but it's so good afterwards because it's basically massaging your diaphragm. Because and this is what a lot of people, you know, going into the nerdy physiological stuff, you don't sing with your diaphragm. I mean, yes, your diaphragm's involved, but you breathe in with it, and your diaphragm tenses actually down when you breathe in, drawing the air into your lungs. And then as you breathe out, it'll start reverberating with your voice, and that's what we talk about when we talk about singing on our bodies. But if your diaphragm is super, super tense, you're going to have a hard time breathing, because that is literally the biggest muscle that is in charge for drawing in the most air. You have some lateral breathing you have some, you know, other directions that your rib cage goes with your muscles, but nothing as big. If you're only breathing with that, good luck. It's super, super shallow breathing. So, you know, that's in a worst case scenario, just like starting every morning, just massaging out your diaphragm.
When you guys speak, are you flexing your core? Do you engage your core when you speak, or is it relaxed? Is that like an important element?
I wouldn't say that we're not tightening the core. I mean, I'm not like I'm trying to lift a heavy weight.
Okay.
It's more of like for me, it's more of a pushing outwards action, where I feel like everything is expanded out through my pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And kind of that openness. Yeah.
Yeah, where you're supporting yourself with your lowest abdominal muscles in your hips. It's interesting because with all this extra time, I've been starting to work out and actually starting to learn how to do a push-up. And what I realized for myself is they talk about exploding through your chest when you're pushing up. But as you're doing a plank or as you're doing a push-up, what you want to be trying to do is focus that energy lower in your hips so you're not tensing all of this up. So if you can learn how to do a push-up while still feeling your ribs kind of released and relaxing up, as relaxed as you can be in that position. And again, it really depends on what you mean when you talk about using our core. If you mean using our lowest abdominal muscles to keep us upright and up and relaxed, then yes. But the rest of it up here, everything on our rib cage, it should just kind of be sitting there. Would you guys agree?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, this conversation is nothing like I thought it was going to be, and it's fascinating. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Allie. What, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say the breath is more important than the abs, I think. The inhalation before you speak is what you really, if you are going to focus on something, that should be the thing you focus on.
Yeah, and if you're super tight, you can't inhale. So that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, and after just having this conversation, I mean, it's so awesome to have you guys here. This is so interesting. I feel like there's so many like actionable things to unpack here. I'm really looking forward to kind of just being like, oh, these are some really cool tips to warm up with. The breathing thing is such an important one. But, you know, I just see this like because I have a separate life where I spend a lot of time dealing with other startups, right? Other founders, VCs, things of that nature. I talk to them and I hear this tension. They're on the phone all day. And I'm like, man, you guys as vocal coaches, it seems like there's a lot of work that would be really helpful, increasing people's lung capacity, teaching them how to breathe, how to speak with more authority. You know, it's just, you know, it's something that I'm just in this conversation, I've been aware of the interactions I've had in the last week, right? Just with different people in different realms. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of tension. That's a lot of posturing. And what it comes across as is inauthenticity. I read that as you're trying to act like something to get me to do something, right? Where what I was like, initially when I came to Sitzler, I love talking to you. I met Tom in real life. We had a coffee together. I love the way your voices convey. But what I really love is that it comes across as authentic. You all speak so differently, but it's not really so much that. It's like, oh, it's just natural. And that's like all comes back to what I'm all about, which is that human connection is so much easier to facilitate, right? Whether you're doing a real estate deal or like, you know, trying to pitch your idea to a venture capital firm or teach a kid how to play guitar, right? So I'm so grateful that you guys came because it was awesome. And I'd encourage everybody to take lots of vocal lessons.
I'll let everyone know I made a little PDF yesterday or 2 days ago for some exercises of the Farinelli breathing technique, which I'll share in the group. And I made an audio. I also made a video of me going through it with students. So I'll see if I can get that off.
Great.
And maybe share it with everybody.
Well, you know, and I would like to, you know, this is going to be this will not be edited at all. Right. This entire thing is just, there's so much valuable information here. I can't wait to watch it again. I can't wait to share it. I can't wait to share it in my other realms as well, because I think it's something that people could really benefit from. I'll reach out to you guys, make sure I have like all your proper information too. Would love to share any things you're working on. We'll get up in Fons family first. And man, so cool. Would anyone like to, you know, just at the end of all this, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but any kind of like closing thoughts or anything they'd like that we haven't touched on that I may have forgotten to ask? Yeah, go ahead, Karin.
One thing that I really emphasize to my students in terms of just using your voice in general, this is the organ of our body that we use to communicate. And there's a certain amount of psychological baggage that comes with that for almost everyone. And a certain amount, it comes down to what you were saying about being genuine and being comfortable with your own voice and finding your own voice, whether you're using it as an instrument or just to communicate. So a lot of what we talked about, you know, mindfulness, noticing what gets tight in our bodies, noticing which voices we use for different scenarios, or noticing if we're talking about something that's difficult to talk about, noticing how that feels in our body. Just embracing the fact that it is not ever possible to separate this from the rest of us. And it is very necessary to consistently be mindful and reconciled in yourself with your own voice. So that would be my closing remark. I mean, you can do all the technical things. Watch The King's Speech if you want a good demonstration of this. If you guys have not seen the movie The King's Speech, I think it was 2011. amazing, amazing story, and very, very much drives that home. But yeah, just taking a moment every morning to be comfortable with yourself and to be comfortable in your own situation. And also in this particular situation, acknowledge the stress we're all under. It's easy to forget. It is super easy to forget. I find myself going along, oh yeah, it's not so bad. And then I'll wake up or come to the end of the day and I'm like, ah. So just being gracious with yourself. Being gracious with yourself and recognizing where the tensions are sitting.
Beautiful. Tom, Allie, would you like to send us off with something?
Well, I was going
say,
to add on to some like physical stretching exercises you could do that I saw once from a friend who was working with, he's an opera singer, and he was working also with a speech pathologist. And a lot of times we have tension in our throat and our tongue. So one thing you could do is stick your tongue out as far as you can, like this, and hold it for a count of 10 or 15 counts. Relax, and then do the opposite, pulling it in all the way and feeling that stretch. And do about 3 or 4 rounds of that. And it should feel uncomfortable to do those things. And then another one was to do like you're sucking in through a straw, and you should feel the larynx then drop down and feel that stretch going down. Again, these are all stretchings. This is not particularly how we're going to speak or sing, but it helps get tension out of this area. And then another one also is to just gently rock this area back and forth. You will feel some crackling.
Again, all the cartilage.
Yeah, all that cartilage. Don't be afraid to touch your throat.
Oh, I'm totally afraid to touch my throat. Okay.
Oh, don't be.
Okay.
Just don't punch it. That's
no throat punching. Beautiful. Allie, what about you?
Gosh, what do I need to say? I can't really. I feel like you guys did such a great job. Oh, I have one tiny thing. We don't talk so much.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We don't have to talk so much, Eric, you were talking about, like, I feel like I got to shout at my students. I feel like I got to talk so much at them now. I challenge you to do the opposite. I challenge everybody here to be like, you know what? I'm going to let my student talk. Ask them questions. Ask them to do the teaching and the talking. Anytime that you feel vocally tired, just don't talk so much. Think of that as like a fun, creative teaching challenge. I know you guys have done it too. We've taught lessons where we couldn't have a voice. We didn't have a voice. We had to keep teaching or keep singing or keep whatever. And you got to figure it out and make it, about the student and make the student responsible. So that would be the last thing I would say, is just don't talk so much.
Or listen.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You guys are beautiful human beings.
I always say,
yes,
something good happens. Just ask them, how would you describe
exactly.
that? Yeah. And then
what did that feel like? Yes, totally. Yeah, I always ask them open-ended questions. Totally. Yes.
Wow. Guys, thank you so much. This was the greatest use of time. There was so much awesome stuff. You're all so great. I'm so glad we got to spend an hour together. I'm really grateful. This was so cool.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I can't wait to post this. Thank you. Have a lovely day. Thanks again.
Yay.
We'll see you guys.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.